right, Sophia, you ready?
Let's do this.
Okay, Sophia, why don't you start by saying your age, how many years you are post-transplant, and then your donor relation.
I am almost 17 years old, and I am almost 12 years post-transplant, which is really crazy to think about. And my donor was my dad.
You mentioned you had some college interviews going on, and how is that going for you being an organ transplant recipient, or you don't even have to relate it to that, but how is that going?
I'd say it's a pretty normal process. I wouldn't say that the transplant affects it at all, as long as I can, well, wherever I end up, as long as I can find like a clinic to get my blood work done, or a clinic that will take my blood and then send it to someone who can get the blood work done, so I can keep checking my meds levels and whatnot. It should be fine. Like, it's a little bit stressful, but it's a normal kind of stress, and that's reassuring.
I know you were really young when you had your transplant, but you did mention to me that you remember a little bit about life before your transplant. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that, what you do remember? And then if you want to just explain a little bit about life today, being almost 12 years post-transplant, how that is for you.
One of my biggest memories is I had like kind of like a large bed as a kid. And this came in handy back when my kidneys first failed, and like I was staying at home all the time because we had this dialysis machine like right next to my bed. Like, this big beeping, scary thing. And like my parents or my mom would take time to like stay in the bed with me and like sleep and make sure sleep with me and make sure that everything was going okay. I just remember a lot of like late night conversations about random things with this machine beeping in the background.
That's a sweet story. I love that story. Do you remember how long you were on dialysis for?
Oh, well, I got sick when I was about 3, so it must have been at least a year and a half, I want to say.
Okay, gotcha. So now that it's been 12 years, I'm sure you don't remember, other than what you just shared with me, you probably don't remember too much of what was going on during transplant, and maybe some of the years post-transplant, but is there anything specific you remember from your transplant hospital stay, or maybe when you got discharged, if that was an exciting day for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember for the years between transplant and illness, I had to have this tube in my stomach. I named it Tubi, and I had to wear like undershirts under all my clothes so that this tube, like with space for this tube underneath it. And for the transplant, we first had to have a minor operation, I think, to like take that out. So I got the scars from that and first. And then for the actual transplant, this was back in the day, as you know. So the scar is a lot bigger, it took a lot longer to like get mobile again. You have to like get out of bed and your whole stomach just like stretches. you probably remember a little bit of that. But shockingly enough, I have like good memories of the hospital. Like, because I was going in for a major surgery, I got one of those, well, back in the day, not anymore, but those cool TVs where like they'd come down from the ceiling and you could move them like right up to your face. And I watched like kid movies like Spirit and Racing Stripes on that thing. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So bummed when I had to move to another room. And also, I liked going to the playroom when I was recovering, because they had this, those little tykes like cars. There was this fire truck, little tykes car that was how I would get my exercise, because I couldn't really walk, but I could like move my legs. So my parents and I would go like all over the hospital in that little thing.
That's very cool. The TV and the playroom are always the draws for those kids, huh?
Oh yeah. And the day I was discharged, I don't know if this is accurate because I think other people remember it less dramatically, but I think I'd been in the hospital for like about a week, and I was in like no rush to leave because aside from the pain, obviously I was like entertained. I didn't have to go to school. My mom was with me all the time. I had junk food, whatever. I was fine. I thought I was fine. But my dad comes in with like, because he obviously had got like the shorter end of the stick. It's harder to like take an organ out than put it in, as I found out later. But he had already been discharged and he was getting a little bit impatient. So he like came to my room with like I think is like a bunch of these little Dianimals things, right? And so to like discharge, you had to prove that you were able to drink on your own and like keep track of fluids and whatnot. So they were like giving me the meds in the hospital. They would have given me the meds at home. But he just came in with like all these drinks. And he's like, okay, you gotta start drinking. Come on, we gotta get out of here. Let's go. Let's go. I was really crabby and I didn't want to do it, but I did. And then I remember when we got home, they took like my favorite yellow plastic cup and they drew like a little 200 milliliter mark and like a 150 milliliter mark. And they're like, okay, this is the cup. This is how much fits in your cup. You have to drink like seven or eight of these cups in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like I was 5 and I was grumpy and I didn't really understand that or appreciate it. So I think we might have taken like a little bit of time after that before putting me back in school just to make sure that I knew like what I was doing and how important it was. And I just remember like a lot of long nights then and later on too, if when I would fall behind in my drinking and they'd sit me down at a table and put like a giant cup of water in front of me and be like, okay, you're not moving from this spot until you drink this. And then like one more just to be safe.
Funny. Incentive. They gave you that incentive, huh?
It was more like blackmail or punishment. But yeah, I think it really speaks to like the way that they took on that responsibility that I don't have like a lot of like stressful kidney related memories. My memories are mostly happy. They took on a lot of the stress of that period of time for me.
And like you said, you weren't in a hurry to really leave the hospital because you said you have a lot of positive memories associated with children's, which I think that's how a lot of people feel. They're so good at making it a very homey place.
Yeah.
So what is life for you today, being a high school student and a teenager with a social life and a school life, maybe even a professional life if you work a job at all? What is your day-to-day like being a transplant recipient?
Well, I don't work a job and I'm not super athletic. So I'm not on any sports teams like I know a lot of my friends are. And I'm introverted, so I don't really stay out late or go anywhere if I don't have to a lot of the time. I'm really select about like I know who my friends are and I know who I want to spend time with. And if I'm not spending time with them, then I'm just chilling in my house. So generally speaking, I'd say like remembering to drink is not the problem, but remembering to like eat something in the morning before I take my meds or remember to take the meds in the same like window, like every 12 hours, I'm not as good at that. I still forget doses like a couple times a month.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a source of responsibility that you have to get used to, I guess, especially if since you were so young when you had your transplant, your mom probably was responsible for a lot of that, huh?
Oh yeah, both of them.
Yeah. So what has it been like having to take that responsibility of making sure you get your water in and get your meds in and everything?
The water is not really a problem. Like I carry a water bottle around, a lot of kids do. Um, I can get like new drinks at lunch and I can refill the water bottle just kind of around the school. That's not an issue. Um, the meds, we've tried like different med remembering devices. Like, there are apps, alarms, whatnot, and those haven't really stuck. Like, I don't know if it's just like some subconscious stubbornness on my part, like just not getting into that good habit. Most of the time it's not an issue, but when I do miss a dose, we do feel like that technically it was pretty preventable.
What are some tips and tricks that you maybe incorporate in your everyday life, or some you can share more that maybe you've tried and haven't worked, but what works for you on a day-to-day basis?
I don't know. It's been so long. I think it's all of it is more of a habit. Like it just kind of fades into the background and you do it automatically, usually. Like the drinking, the meds, you know, most of the time, it's good. It's like brushing your teeth. You just do it. You don't really think about it that much. It does help that like I keep like a pill box and I refill it myself. And when I'm running low on meds, like I know I have to like stay on top of that because soon I will be the one going through the pharmacy and calling for probably an annoying amount of time to have to get refills. So there's some responsibility that really helps you remember.
Feeling solely responsible for doing those things can definitely feel stressful at times. But how do you feel about that? Having, I know maybe you're newer to having to do all of that on your own. I mean, obviously your parents are still there, and I'm sure you can ask them when you need to. But just knowing that you're going to be off on your own soon and having to remember all these things on top of being a student, how does that make you feel?
Um, I think I'll carry on as normal for the most part. I mean, I assume that college is going to be like a gradual process of like opening up and readapting, but I don't expect like my methods or my system or my habits to really change that much. Like, I'll still wear yellow, I'll still read books, I'll still take my meds. I don't expect that to change. It's just kind of part of my personality now.
I love that. Please never stop wearing yellow. You mentioned that your dad was your donor. That's amazing. So awesome. Obviously, that's the biggest form of support that he could give to you. What other ways has your family or friends helped you out? What's their kind of role in your day to day or during transplant? How were they your support system um, for getting through a transplant and now living your day to day life?
If I am out somewhere with my siblings, sometimes, like if they realize what time it is, they'll be like, "Hey, did you take your meds?" But I wouldn't say it comes up almost never with my friends. I'd say like they know, but it's just kind of faded into the background for them too because it doesn't really it's not really like a major clear presence in my life, like especially not from the outside. So I don't really talk about it. They don't really talk about it. We're all just kind of mutually aware. And yeah, my parents are still like the most, I don't want to say paranoid, but they're the most on top of things, probably. Because if I am late with the meds or they don't know if I've taken them, they will be the ones checking in and reminding me. And then one thing that my dad does kind of every year, my dad and I in March, we'll go out and we'll do something kind of around the time of our transplant anniversary. Just because, you know, it's something that's definitely worth celebrating. And we call it, or I call it, he doesn't call it anything. He calls it the anniversary. I call it Kidney Day.
I like that kidney day. I call it transplantiversary. So that's
Mm,
that's my name.
yeah, you really got to make it your own.
Yeah, for sure. That's so fun. And March is a good time to do that. My transplant, I don't know if I told you this, but my transplant was New Year's Eve. So it's
Ooh,
always a New Year's Eve party. And then also, oh, hey, Claire had her transplant 12 years ago today.
yeah,
But no,
it's like a
it's always
second birthday.
that. Yeah, exactly. It is like a second birthday. It's just as much celebrating, just as much thankfulness, and if not more. It's almost like my birthday is my birthday, but you almost get a little more sentimental on kidney day or transplant anniversary for sure. Since you mentioned you were an introvert and maybe that social life isn't exactly like others, which I'm a big advocate for. You don't need to go out every night, and you don't need to be a social butterfly, and you don't need to have 100 friends by your side at every any given moment. But it sounds like the friends that you have, like you said, you know who you want to hang out with and you know who you want to be around. You mentioned that they say to you, "Hey, did you take your medicine? Hey, did you drink your water?" How did you find out like these are my friends? These are my true friends because they say these things to me, and they truly care for me and they want the best for me. What was that kind of process like, if at all?
I think it was long and slow and gradual. Like I said, like we don't really talk about the kidney stuff. Usually it's me remembering like while I'm with them, like, oh yeah, I have to do this, I have to drink, I have to take my meds. But I remember back in the day, because I've known them for a long time. But when I'd go over to their house, their parents would be the ones reminding me to drink because they got the message from my parents that this is something that I needed. And like, I don't know, just like a long tradition of people just like looking out for me. And that's cool.
That's very cool. I love that you feel safe. And it's almost like you're kind of running this race while you're in the moment and getting the transplant and going through all these medical things. And then at some point you slow down and you take a look around you and you notice the people who are next to you and you notice the people who have fallen behind. And I think that's kind of how you got to make your choices or see who's really, really there for you in those moments for sure. What has been your personal journey with mental health? What has gotten you through the bad times? What keeps you going during the good times? Anything like that?
Well, like I said, I think a lot of the stress was taken on by my parents early on. I'm sure my mental health was not great during the prepping for the surgery and the staying in the hospital and recovering from the surgery. I'm sure my mental health was not great for all the time, but I also don't really remember the bad stuff, like I've said. So that hasn't been an issue. What has been an issue sometimes on and off over like years and years, so not often, is like the realization over and over again that I will be doing this for the rest of my life in some form. Like no matter how irritating or inconvenient it gets, like that's that. And I've more or less made my peace with it because, you know, everyone has their quirks and we are obviously the lucky ones. But I'd say the worst moment semi recently was like about a year ago when I realized, or like maybe I knew at some level, but I acknowledged that this was not going to last forever and I was going to need to do this whole thing again in X amount of years. I really, really hated that idea. Still do.
Right. That definitely can hit deep. I don't recall a realization moment, but that's definitely something that I think we forget to think about. And then when we do, you think, why did I think of that? Why did I go there? I didn't need to go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely the deep stuff that you can, especially when, you know, you and me we're both almost 12 years post transplant. So we're getting on the further side of things and starting to think about, well, what's going to happen in 5 or 6 years. Maybe I hope we both have 30, 40 years to go, but you never know what's going to happen. So how is your relationship with your siblings? I know you mentioned you don't really talk about being a transplant recipient on a day-to-day basis. You know, you're so many years post-transplant and it's always kind of in the back of your mind now. So what is that sibling relationship like for you?
It's just a fact of life. Like I don't think they can remember. Like if I can barely remember, they definitely can't remember what life was before this. My brother was literally a baby when I got the transplant. And my sister is always like 2 years younger, so she would have been like early at the age to form lasting memories. So I don't know. I've never really asked her like what she remembers. I don't know if she remembers. She used to tug on Tubi. I don't know. I don't think she recalls.
So what would you say is the best part about being a transplant recipient and the worst part about being a transplant recipient?
The best part is my life. I'm normal. I think of myself as normal. It doesn't really like it's given me my quality of life, but it doesn't really like affect it. I mean, next to that, like the blood draws and the appointments are just part of the routine. And I'd say the worst part is the immunocompromisation, like the knowledge that if I ever want to have a kid biologically, we're gonna have to like keep an eye on me and switch with the bed regimen and be really careful with that kind of stuff. And also that like, you know, long-term effects of these meds are not, I could be wrong about this, but like they're not super well known, but they're generally like they do like I know the Tacro does kind of like wear down your kidney even as it protects it. And just that, like not knowing what this will look like later in life when, you know, my body and my immune system get weaker naturally. That's the worst part.
What would you say to someone who is thinking about becoming an organ donor, going through that process of signing up? Someone who's thinking about it, but maybe they're not too sure yet. What would you say to them?
I thought about this question a lot. And I had something prepared, and then I remembered that it's really different, like being a living donor versus a dead donor. So I say if you are going to sign up to become a dead donor, like worst case scenario, it's a great choice. It doesn't really affect your life at all. It doesn't affect the quality of care you receive in the hospital. It doesn't affect any particular funeral plans that are really important to you. It's not the same as donating your body to science. Like, your body, like you can still choose what happens to it. You still get that autonomy. And it doesn't always work, obviously. We are lucky. And it is like a significant chunk of like your life. You will have to stay in the hospital and recover from this major surgery along with us. But if it's feasible for you to do this and like, maybe it'll work out. Maybe someone gets their life back. Like, wouldn't that just be so cool? You did that? Yeah, you. I would pay it forward if I could, I think, but I don't know if that's feasible given the drugs I'm on.
Right. No,
I can't give blood. I can't give blood. You can't give blood when you have immunosuppressants in it all the time.
I think we return the favor by doing what we're doing right
Yeah.
now and by living our life to the fullest and by spreading kindness and positivity and conquering the world and going off to college and, doing the things we wouldn't be doing if it weren't for these wonderful, wonderful people.
Sure. All this was to get you a life. You gotta just use that. Go out, live it.
Like you said, your dad was your donor, living donor. That's amazing. And I'm sure there's lots of inside jokes there. But what would you say to your dad if he was sitting in front of you? Maybe not as a daughter-father relationship, but as a donor and a recipient relationship.
Hey Dad, it's me. Fia, your number one daughter. Thank you for the kidney. I love you, obviously. Thank you for the life, the quality of life. Thank you for always being the one to hassle me about the meds and remind me about the drinking, just in case. And thank you for always planning and funding our kidney day trips. And I promise one of these years I will get off my butt and I will help you with that. But not quite yet.
Sofia, is there anything you would like to add? Any questions maybe you want me to ask you? Anything you want to share?
Oh, one thing, because I thought this was super cute and I didn't find out about it until years later. The first time I was in the hospital, like when I was like 2 or 3 and I had pneumonia and like my kidneys were failing. My family, they live on like opposite sides of the country. Like they're far away. We're in Wisconsin. They're on either coast, but they take turns like cycling in to like offer support and like just spend time and presents and whatnot. And one of the things I don't remember a lot of that, obviously. But one of the things that I still have, like a relic of that age, is that I have get well soon cards from my entire kindergarten class at the time. And like, interestingly, all of these like friends of my one aunt's, like she was going through like this difficult time with my family. And she was part of some kind of group. I don't remember what, but she shared like our situation with them and they sent like a whole ton of get well soon cards. So I have all of these cards, like, I keep them safe. They're in boxes. They're like a time capsule. Just all of these positive wishes for this little girl that they really didn't know, a lot of them. And that's so cool.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I was gonna ask for a story or something like that anyway, so that was perfect. I think those mementos are so special. I also got so many things from, classmates and, the whole school and cards and pictures and stories and everything like that. And those aren't things that I will ever get rid of. And you're right, it's like a little time capsule. And the people that come out of the woodworks when you go through something like that is truly amazing. And I will forever be astonished by people's kindness and generosity.
Oh yeah, totally. If you wanted one more hospital story, I do have one more of those.
Go for it.
Sorry. I think this happened over multiple hospital stays because, they don't really, they're doing a lot of refurbishing now, but that's a relatively new development. There's this, I don't know how often you go to the hospital still, children's, but if you go to the lower level, there's this one blue ramp. It's like, like tiles, and it has like kind of like, it goes down and then there's like a little hump and it goes down again. And when I was a kid and I was in the hospital for like sickness, transplant, I liked to push, or for people to push like my wheelchair down that ramp like that. That was the cool thing. That was the ramp. That was what I did to occupy myself, apparently. And that was what I did again in like the little fire truck car. Yeah, I don't know. It's so weird because I have all these good memories and everyone else has all these bad ones.
No, I get that. I think
that ramp. I love that ramp. We still pass that sometimes.
for sure. And I don't think it's that we don't have the bad memories. It's just that we don't focus on the bad memories because they're not as memorable or influential as the good memories,
Mm-hmm.
For sure.